back to it. All right, so we talked about
fuel metering force.
Did we talk about fuel metering force?
Yes,
we talked
we did.
about this, the fuel metering force and the air metering force and how this works. And all right, so it's Wednesday. Oh man, I got one more day to finish this. Whoa, crap. Okay, and we have one more carburetor to get through.
Well, we got technically 2 days. Today and tomorrow.
Okay, quit crying about it.
You stop crying. I'm not crying. You're crying. I'm not crying. You're crying.
Oh man.
Oh my
Oh
lord.
jeez.
Oh,
This keeps going on.
Oh my lord.
Okay, I'm not sure what I'm going to do here because I talked too much on things that I shouldn't have. Current slide, yes. Okay, so we talked, and this was the PS5, and it's the basic, right? So it's the smaller carburetor. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move on to the bigger carburetor. This is in fact the PS5. This is just in reality. Now why don't we just cover this?
Yeah.
All right. I can do this. It's just getting all the notes out. There's going to be a problem. So, all right. So let's get reacquainted with everything is. All right. You've already seen this a second ago. So now it's just added color and a few more items. Oh, we're going to lose Andrea. All right. So chamber A is
Impact air.
impact air. Okay, that's a pressure. It wants to move the poppet valve to the right. Okay, let's take a look at this poppet valve here because it's actually rather confusing.
Me and Vin were looking at this earlier.
Okay, so poppet valve moving to the right does what? Opens it. This is not the seat.
What?
Oh.
No.
Okay, it's like a little stop or something. The seat is in here. It's very, I can't even,
Oh.
okay?
Okay.
So to the right opens it, and then just consider that some sort of weird stop or something.
Okay.
It's at the smallest point.
So
of that
if
jet.
that were to touch, if fuel would still flow.
Yeah.
It's just that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
that helps a lot, right? Okay, chamber B is
Vacuum.
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 Okay, so we're calling this E, fuel pressure inlet.
Yep.
So through the strainer, up, fuel pressure connection that goes to your gauge. So this is the back side. There is a vapor vent in this particular one. When you get bubbles happen in here, if the bubbles collect and were to, bubbles actually will go to the top and you're going to start getting air bubbles through the system, then it's not going to run well. You're going to get hits and it's going to miss. So you're always sending, in this particular carb, vapor back to the vent. It's a little injection kind of a thing, a little, well, it's not. It's a orifice. And so it's just going back to the tank. So bubbles will flow up to the top, fill up, come to here, just squirt back to the tank. So you have a return coming off the carburetor, going to the tank. All right, fuel comes in, goes across the screen. We'll fill inlet through the screen up, fills up this chamber. And so we've already talked about what happens with A and B. Okay, A plus B is air metering force. Okay. Now this one is slightly different in that you don't see a C over here, do you?
No.
No. Well, the C is not working on the diaphragms. You know what? Maybe I shouldn't have gone to this one. Let's come back to this one.
No.
Yeah, let's do that because I know what I want to do.
No.
There, let's do this one.
Oh, okay.
More clear.
Except it looks like that.
Okay, that's not bad.
That's better.
All right.
Slightly.
Got impact?
And I do like this one a little better. All right, so let's talk about what we have. A is impact air. B is, so A plus B equals, okay, fuel metering force is D because it's bigger, minus C. That's proper math. All right, so the fuel comes in here, goes through the screen, comes in and enters chamber E. All right, right here is a little float. I told you one of the carburetors has a float, very small float with a vapor return. So if we think about it, bubbles come up here and they'll collect here. And when the bubbles collect to the point where it's air, what happens to that float?
float drops down, it opens up the vent.
Right? And this is really the whole point of these two carburetors. Well, you know, some people argue, oh man, we need to really update the curriculum for Part 147 schools because they're still teaching pressure carbs. Dang right. You know how much you just learn about fluid dynamics and how things work by these carbs? I think it's wonderful. Okay, so just like that, you figure it out. You know, oh, the float drops, then what happens?
It opens up that needle valve.
And then,
Vapor goes to the vapor return.
where's the vapor return?
To the tank.
Back to the tank. What happens if the float sticks down?
You'll just keep getting fuel back to the tank.
How will you know it as a pilot or a mechanic? You won't. You'll never know. So who cares? What if it sticks in the up position?
You won't get air bleed off.
Apparently, you'll get air through the system and it sputters. Yeah.
You have your fuel pressure gauge right at the top too. Does that also measure it when there's air there?
Pressure's pressure.
Pressure's pressure.
So it'd just be air in the line and fuel pressing on the air, and see, still you wouldn't know. Okay, so fuel comes in. We got a poppet valve. We have an idle spring here. Why do we have an idle spring?
Holds it open just enough for idle.
Opens it up just enough for idle. Why they didn't leave some, I don't know. That's the way it is. Okay. Follow me so far? So fuel's going to come in. It goes into D. It tries to close the poppet valve. But technically A, B, and C are opening it. All right. Fuel comes around through here. And once it passes the main metering jet, I'm now in this chamber here where it is metered and always at a constant pressure.
Yes.
Why? Because the discharge nozzle is a...
Fixed or fixed?
No, it is not fixed. That would screw it all up.
Pressure relief.
Pressure relief valve, keeping this at the same pressure. All right, before I bore you to death and anybody falls asleep, I want to try to explain something to you because seems to be the hardest concept for every single class, and it's really so simple that I can't understand why you don't get it. What is an AMC? Automatic mixture control. Mixture control. So it is a sealed bellows that is sensing the impact air. See that? So when we go up in altitude, potato chip bag theory, what's it going to do?
Expand.
And so that needle is going to do what?
It's going to close off that impact air.
It's going to close that off. All right. So let me ask you. You have a garden hose with one of the ends on it you squeeze? Okay. So if you leave it laying on the ground and you're not squeezing the little nozzle,
It's not running.
it's not running, then your dad comes home and runs over the hose and has the tires sitting on the hose.
Still not running.
Still not running. Does the pressure on either side really know that the hose is being pressed?
No.
Kinked?
No.
Nope.
Okay, everybody follow that.
Yeah.
This is really important. So, what happens when you pick up the end of the nozzle and squeeze it? It goes,
It squirts out just the pressure.
now it knows, doesn't it?
Yes.
Why does it now suddenly know?
The pressure
Because
goes.
you release it.
Because you have flow. You kink something off with no flow, it's stagnant. It doesn't know. So if you had impact air coming in, going into a chamber and it was completely stagnant, and somewhere in the middle I kinked off the hose, what happens to the pressure in chamber A?
It's the same.
Totally stays the same. Go up, I can go down, and force it would stay the same, but it never ever changes. So what's going to make it change?
Flow.
Got to have flow, right? Everybody follow that?
Yeah.
So where am I going to get my flow? Right there. So why is there, this is going to be your oral question, why is there an air bleed there?
Flow. Adds flow.
Airflow.
The simple answer is, without it, the automatic mixture control won't work. Honestly, if you answer that, usually I'll say, all right, next question. Sometimes I'm going to say, why?
The automatic mixture control won't work.
Without that air bleed.
Without the air bleed.
Because there's no airflow through chamber A.
Is that airflow to chamber A and into chamber B? And that's why there's
No,
airflow?
you've got to have airflow into A. So I could have just drilled a hole right here and let it drain out here,
Right.
but it won't because there's still no flow. The pressure here is the same as the pressure here, so it doesn't really flow. You gotta have a low pressure.
Oh.
Is there a low pressure anywhere near A that we could tap into?
Venturi.
The Venturi.
Venturi. Well, we could have ran over here to the Venturi, but look, it's already connected to the Venturi.
Okay.
Okay, so-
That's why.
So it's A and B are kind of, they're not like that, but at least the pressure is kind of like how in the Stromberg, the Venturi's got the low pressure and the bowl is the high pressure. There's the
Sure.
high pressure in A,
Yeah.
low pressure in B, so that's,
And
okay.
that's what creates airflow.
Okay, that's what creates the flow.
You've got to have flow. Why do I need flow?
So that's automatic mixture control.
Otherwise, the automatic mixture control doesn't work. Okay. I hope you got that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I say, we talked about it in class, this was it. This was the talking about it in class. Because I guarantee you, the craziness I hear is just like, why would you say that? I mean, it's like, okay, so why is there an air bleed there? Well, without an air bleed, A and B don't work. Well, that's my next question. Why? I want to know. What are you thinking? That sounds interesting. Tell me about that. If I plug up the air bleed, will A and B work?
Yes.
What doesn't work?
The automatic mixture control.
Mixture control.
Other than that, does everything else work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything else works.
So now there's a bleed. Do A and B still work?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just got a little bit of flow. It's this little tiny hole. Just a little bit of flow is all you need to make it work. All right. So air is coming in through the automatic mixture control. What happens if the automatic mixture control doesn't work?
Runs rich
When?
at altitude.
At altitude.
So, just runs rich at altitude. So what do you do about it? Manual mixture control. Okay. All right, so we have air in here. We have air over here. We already said that A plus B is air metering force. It tries to move the poppet over. When it's at idle, there is no A and there is no B because there's not enough airflow
Through the Venturi.
through the Venturi. Same question I asked you about carburetors. How come you need this idle circuit? Well, the answer is because there's not enough air flowing through a Venturi to make it work. So, all right, so we have the idle spring holds it open. We open the throttle a little bit. We have A and B come in. It tries to move the poppet over, which it does. Fuel comes in from E, which is under a higher pressure, presses on D and starts to close it. All right, and the two find their equilibrium. See, it helps. So fuel comes through here. Okay, this is the idle mixture valve. Well, why do you, and it mechanically linked to the throttle. What do you think I got that for?
When you have it at idle, it only lets a certain amount of fuel out.
Gonna just
There you go.
fuel.
It's an idle metering jet connected to the throttle. Why? Because at idle, this thing is stupid. It's dumb as a freaking post because it only holds the poppet open and doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
In fact, it's so stupid that if you turn on the boost pump, it'll flood the engine. It doesn't know. It's like, oh, fuel, here we go. Come on in. Let's just go. The discharge nozzle, let's just spray it in, filling the cylinders up, and hydraulic lock the whole thing. It's what it does. So it's going to run rich, and so you pull back the throttle, and it makes a tiny little orifice right there. And as you move the throttle open, the orifice gets bigger and bigger and bigger until at some point, the main metering jet goes, I got this. All right? So under normal circumstances, then it's going to come through here, go through the main metering jet, past the mixture control, which works just like the idle mixture valve down here, but now we're
Up there.
at higher throttle settings. You can pull back and lean it by just making that a little bit smaller, okay? So shoots on around, and this, now after all this, it is, of course, at a constant because
Fuel and the constant is
The relief arch.
because of the relief valve at the discharge. All right. So we've got that. We've got a few other things in here which are fun to look at. Yeah.
What is that auxiliary metering jet?
Well, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I'll go that way then. All right. So at the same time, you can see that there's a little bypass around. So the fuel is coming this way and going that way, and it's kind of meeting in the middle and going up. It's actually a third way to go this way too. We'll get to that in a second. You have an extra amount of fuel, and this is usually the last thing I get into, because at some point you don't want that little bit of extra fuel. So you have three ways fuel is going to come in. You've got the main way, the economizer, and the auxiliary metering jet. These systems have ADI, which is a water injection system into the engine. So it's for extra power.
Yes.
So you inject the water into the engine, the water turns to steam, and it actually prevents detonation and adds more power without using fuel.
World War II technology.
Oh,
Yeah.
because the steam creates more pressure?
Yes. All right. So when and it's pilot operated, they turn on the ADI, anti-detonation injection, the water, which is water, an antifreeze agent, and oil. So there's 3 things in there. Oil to keep it from rusting, antifreeze to keep it from freezing, and the water to do the work. So when I turn that system on, it takes the place of extra fuel. We need extra fuel for detonation, right? And cooling at high power settings. Well, if water takes the place from that, I got to tell the carburetor, hey, you back off a little bit on the fuel, would you? That's what that is. You click the switch, the ADI system turns on, the fluid pressure comes in here, presses on the diaphragm, and closes that auxiliary jet, de-richening the fuel. Okay? Yeah.
All the like water and stuff doesn't go through the carburetor.
No,
just
it's
closing.
injected somewhere else.
Just
Okay.
injected it.
They're just closing this valve. Got it? All right. But if we look over here, we have an economizer. Let's talk about it. Now, it's called an economizer. You decide if it's economizer or power enrichment. Under normal circumstances, here's a diaphragm, there is a spring plus C pressure. We'll say C is, I think, 5 psi. So 5 psi plus the spring is holding this closed. What happens when the D pressure is higher than 5 plus spring pressure?
Closes.
Pushes it back. It opens?
It'll push it open,
Pushes it open.
adding extra fuel. And when would D pressure go up high?
Full throttle.
What?
Full throttle.
Full throttle. High power settings. When the poppet valve opens the most, you're going to get more pressure in D.
Yeah.
More pressure in D will come down through here, find its way through here, overcome the spring pressure and C,
God, okay.
and open the secondary valve, allowing more fuel to come in. When will that happen?
High power settings.
High power settings. Is that power enrichment or economizer?
Enrichment.
Power enrichment.
So I call it a power enrichment. Somebody else called it economizer. Goes, no, it closes at mid-range, so that's economizer. So take your pick. I don't care.
It does the same
It does.
thing.
Okay. Gosh, that's almost everything except for the primer. I don't really. It's just a solenoid right there that opens a little valve that allows fuel to go into nozzles that are attached to the cylinders.
Accelerator pump.
All right, accelerator pump. That's a cute little thing right there. Now, by the way, this is what I expect of you. How do I know all this? What book did I read to figure this out? I didn't. I just sat here and looked at it and figured it out, right? I read, I'm not saying about me. I'm just saying this is us. This is who we are, right? And this is what I expect from you. I read the books on how a pressure carb works because there's some stuff out there. Then I looked at this. I thought, based upon what I read, let me figure this out. And some stuff you just have to figure out what the hell's going on. Like this right here. It's like, what the hell's okay? So let's think about it. So here we have an accelerator pump. Now you know what an accelerator pump is, right? When you jam the throttle open, this plunger goes and sprays fuel into the cylinder,
Yep.
or into the
Discharge.
discharge nozzle up into the engine. All right, so does it do, well, let's see what happens. So here's a plunger linked to the throttle, okay? This is not new to us. Some check valves, so when I pull it back, I can see that, there we go.
There we go.
I forget, it's big to me. I can see that the suction will pull this ball off its seat and fill this chamber, okay? And when I push on it, it's going to offset this ball, and the pressure is going to go to here, to this way, and to that way. Now let's think about what's happening. If it comes up here and presses on this, what's it going to do?
It's gonna shove the poppet valve,
Open it
send more fuel.
Poppet valve's going to open more,
Letting more fuel out.
letting more fuel go into D, which goes around and goes to the engine.
And then
All right.
the extra fuel's going back to E.
Well, what if there was no orifice there?
They would
work.
all go to E.
It would all go to E.
It would all go to E, and
Nothing would happen.
work.
it would hydraulic lock.
All that, yeah.
And so E would be held open for the rest of its life, basically. Because there'd be no way, can you see that? There's no way to bleed it off. So once this went forward and you pushed fuel into this line, if this orifice wasn't there, it would come up here and push that. And if you pulled the throttle back a little bit and jammed it again, it would suck more fuel and make it go worse. And it would keep doing that until it actually forced this thing out, broke everything, and it fell down.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so you got to put an orifice here. Now you got to put an orifice because if this passage and this passage were the same, and you pushed on it, then the fuel would go this way. Go, never mind. Let's go this way. Comes around back to E and goes. We just dump it. All right. So I don't see that E is going this way at all. All right. In fact, based on the drawing, an argument can be made: the square area of this versus the square area of that cancel each other out if E were to come around and go to right there, right? Yeah.
If it put him in, it would push the plunger back, which
yeah.
would block off.
Yes. So.
Upflows it past
So
it.
during normal operation, let's say we haven't touched the throttle for an hour. Well, E, it would stand to reason that the pressure in E is going to come through here, and what's going to keep it from equalizing? So E would be actually right here as well, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay. But if these are pistons and they're the exact same size, E pushing on this piston and E pushing on that piston mean it's
They're equal, and it will do nothing.
Mechanically equalized.
mechanically, hydraulically equalized. They're good. So I jam on the throttle, fuel comes up here, presses on this, opens it temporarily, because what happened with the carburetor when you've jammed the throttle open, the air rush goes through. It made it really kind of lean until everything equalizes. But in this case, you just force the poppet valve open hydraulically. Just get that fuel going. We'll settle up in a little bit. We'll worry about it later. We'll settle up right later. But you got to let it bleed off. So you push this forward, and then fuel instantly starts to bleed out of the orifice, and it comes back to no effect from the accelerator pump. Was that just so easy?
Yeah, that was super easy.
I mean, that's the oral right there. I mean, that's everything you got to know. Yeah.
It looks like
Why don't all engines use an ADI system? If it's
Oh, it's a whole nother system. So now you have to have a water tank. You have to manage it. You'd have to have the plumbing, a pump.
More weight.
Yeah. Weight, complexity, cost.
Well, I guess it's not a drawing, but the picture from yesterday.
Yeah.
Is there any way I can see that? Because I got notes from someone else, but the drawing, on here, it's got the bleed tube from A to B, but it
Yeah.
looked like it was a tube coming out of B and then to the outside.
You're talking about
So I was just trying to.
That
Yes.
this one.
That one right there.
Okay, so okay, see, there's no bleed here.
No, because there's no AMC.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
There's just a simple way to start. We started here, and then we move forward. All right. That's the big piece. Wow. I honestly can't add anything to that, I don't think. It's
it's
just,
not as complicated as it looks.
it's not.
And the primer is there and just
Yeah, it.
squirts out a little bit.
Yeah, this is new to.
All right, let me see.
It's a hand-free link, and you got the white dot, this here.
I really did. I mean, all right, you want to like hold it right there and just go notes about all this stuff before I move on to the other stuff? Because what we're going to do, okay. PS5 is actually a little more complicated. I should reorder my slides. Is that, yeah, you can see that okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
what is ADI stand for?
Anti-detonation injection. ADI. Okay. So I honestly think this one's a little more difficult. This is the smaller PS5. Is it helpful if I do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
But then I can't draw.
It's okay.
Impact error.
Everything is already colored for you.
All right. Where do we want to start? Okay, fuel. Oh, we started here. Fuel comes in, goes past the screen, into chamber E if you want. Vapor vent, we've talked about that. The poppet, now you know, goes
It continues
that way.
Goes to the right.
Goes to the right. If I,
Yep.
Yeah, for
Yep.
right. Some of you don't know. It goes to the right. Okay, we don't have C helping us. So if I said, what is air metering force? You're going to say it's
A plus B.
A plus B.
A plus B. What is fuel metering force?
D.
D minus C.
There's no C. Don't say C.
It's
No,
just
don't
D.
say C. Make me come back there.
Pick her up.
For the other one, it is.
For the
This
other
one is
one,
not.
it's C.
This one does not have C.
I have permission to throw Skittles at her. Super weak. Okay, there's no, because is C helping anywhere here?
No.
See,
Okay.
it has nothing to do with it.
All right. Okay. So, but we know how all of this works. But it's a little different. So, number one, what happens at idle?
The spring in A
Spring holds
pushes
it
it
open
open
just
just barely.
Spring holds it open. Now it's just an idiot.
Yep.
Okay. But how are we going to shut it down before we get on anything else?
Is it the
Now, the shutting it down part is kind of interesting.
Have an idle cut off.
I don't, wow, that just sounds like all kinds of stuff you guys have learned before. Okay, idle cutoff. So when you pull the manual mixture control, what you're going to do is pull this lever out. It comes out. And what that does is it opens a bleed right here. Now, it's also the mixture control. And this has a bleed, but it works different. So think about this. You have impact air coming up, and you have vacuum coming in here. What happens if I start dumping a bunch of my A pressure into B?
starts getting lower?
What gets lower?
The C.
I lose my air metering force.
Yeah.
Follow?
Yeah.
So there's a bleed right here, and if that's blocked, then A has full pressure, B has full suction. But if I start sliding this out, then rather than the pressure going up into A and moving the poppet to the right, it starts bleeding out
Kind of like the back suction.
like a back suction.
Yeah.
Starts bleeding out, and I start losing this air metering force, which starts closing the poppet. That's how the mixture control works on this. Follow? Okay, but when I want to go to idle cutoff, I pull it all the way out, equalizing both chambers. Just dump the pressure right into the suction, or dump the suction into the pressure, however you want to look at it. This comes out and it pushes down on this lever. This lever rides on this cam. This comes up and pushes on this.
Oh,
This is what's trippy, and it took me a while to figure this out. This is not pinned. This is a floating piece of something. It's hinged right here. That's a
so
hinge.
it's gonna pull it.
Push that
Okay.
up.
This plunger comes up and pushes.
It pushes it
Pushes
up.
it up.
Pushes it
This
that way,
goes that
pulls-
way.
Pulls
Eh.
the spring.
Pushes it up, and then it grabs that poppet and yanks it that way.
Okay.
And that seats it.
And that's just gonna cut fuel.
Cut fuel.
That,
Yeah, kind of at an angle.
It is, yeah.
funky, but
I have
it
some.
works.
We have a cutaway of this carburetor in the lab. You guys can look at, and you'll see how that's a little floating thing. And
Freaking weird.
okay, got that? That's easy enough. Okay, it comes through our main metering jet. See, now we're talking about metered fuel. It comes across the other side of the carburetor. There are some different versions of what happens right here. This doesn't depict it real well. That does.
Is that, oh.
This is what we're looking at right there. There's a stepped needle in there.
Okay.
All right, so it's connected to the throttle. So as you are in idle, this will be plugging the hole,
Okay.
and then as you pull it back, it's like changing the ortho size.
More fuel through.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you can see here's the 65% power, and then here's max power is no needle.
Yeah.
Got it? Okay, we'll go back one.
Slowly uncovering the hole.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, there are some different versions of that, but that's kind of the version I'm going with. So you can see it's the manual idle rod control. It's connected to the throttle, so that when you pull the throttle back, this will pull out.
That
So,
whole
all right.
Rod system right there. Is
Yeah.
connected.
Yep. So the fuel is going to come around through here. Now, what do we have here, just by color?
Vacuum. Yeah.
Vacuum.
Vacuum. Right, and so that vacuum is working against or with a diaphragm to help pull things back. So it's in conjunction with all of that. So it gets kind of complicated how all that works. But you do have the vacuum over here pulling this back. Also with the throttle, you'll see how that works. You can pull this back, and so as it moves back, the fuel comes around and more fuel is allowed to flow out. All right, so just another way of controlling it. So then it's going to come up to an accelerating pump. Another interesting little item here. So right there should be colored. You don't. It's hard to see because it wasn't colored well. So that tells me that that chamber is connected to this chamber. So what happens is right here we have pink. Pink is,
Pressure after the throttle.
Manifold.
well, in this situation, it would be a suction. So we have a heavy vacuum on it. So we can see that a vacuum is going to come through here, and we're going to get a vacuum which is going to pull this diaphragm and spring back. Well, when it does that, fuel comes through here. Like I said, I don't love the way this is drawn, but
That's a check valve.
it's a check valve. And so it pulls it back in. Let me see, fuel comes in,
Through the top with a tiny little hole.
right?
To the suction.
It'll fill this up. And then when you go to full throttle, this suddenly becomes a higher pressure. So higher pressure plus spring pressure pushes on the diaphragm, which opens this up, which puts fuel in here, which allows it to go around and go out. You follow that? So
Okay.
vacuum pulls the diaphragm back and holds it. And then when you lose the vacuum, the spring pressure pushes forward and injects a load of fuel in.
Interesting.
The vacuum is from right here. Yeah, it's from the manifold, not the venturi.
From that sudden rush of air.
Yeah.
Right.
Follow so far?
Yes.
Okay. There's some other discharge nozzle differences too. The function of the discharge nozzle, and we talk a lot about the pressure relief valve aspect. It also has to provide a positive shutoff of the fuel. You can't have fuel dribbling, which is what it will do in these systems. So you're looking for a spring that is actually going to close off the valve. And when you get pressures, it will open it up and let it start working. So if we look at that, we have pressure here, it comes up through here. The spring is pushing the diaphragm to the right.
Pushing it closed.
No, that's vacuum.
Yeah, that's vacuum.
And so vacuum will pull it this way.
Pull it that way.
Fuel pressure will assist and also go that way. So when you get enough vacuum and enough fuel pressure, it will pull it open and allow it to start to work. You also notice there's some bleed air coming in here to emulsify, which they added to that.
Doing emulsification things.
6 psi or so is what we're using.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. All right, so we'll look at, let me see. We got that. Some of these okay, so there's the idle needle. We'll talk more about that. Oh, the AMC. Okay, you can put an AMC on this one too. Might be getting way ahead of myself here. I'll come back around to that. We just talked about that. Discharge nozzle diaphragm type accelerating system. And all right, let's do some notes after a break. That was good timing.